I froze in my driveway, suitcase in hand, as red and blue lights flashed across my mansion's facade. There she was, or tyrannical HOA president, Barbara standing on my porch in my late wife's silk robe, pointing wildly. "Arrest him! He's breaking into my house!" she shrieked at the cops she'd just called. I'd returned from Tokyo 2 weeks early, only to find she'd moved in, treating my home like her personal palace. But as her smug facade cracked, she had no idea I'd been watching her every move from across the world. What elaborate trap had I set that would turn her arrogance into a felony arrest? Stay tuned, this revenge is unreal. I'd spent years grinding as a cybersecurity consultant, chasing contracts across continents, living out of cramped hotel rooms and tiny city apartments. Finally, at 38, I'd earned my slice of paradise, a sleek, modern mansion of glass and steel in Oak Ridge Estates, a wealthy suburban enclave promising peace. The kind of place where sprinklers hum in unison and every lawn looks like it's auditioning for a magazine cover. My home was my fortress, a sanctuary to recharge between international jobs. I imagined quiet evenings on the patio, the stress of firewalls and data breaches melting away under starlit skies. The neighborhood sparkled with order, too much order, I'd soon learn. My first week, I met Arthur, the retired professor next door, who welcomed me with a wry smile and a warning about the Homeowners Association. "They're sticklers," he said, gesturing toward the pristine street. "Watch out for Barbara." I laughed it off, picturing petty squabbles over lawn heights. I'd dealt with Fortune 500 CEOs. How bad could an HOA be? But then came the first sign of trouble. A crisp letter slid into my mailbox, citing my sleek black steel mailbox as non-compliant with the HOA's faux colonial aesthetic. The fine, $50 a day. It was signed by Barbara Clean, HOA president, whose name already carried a whiff of menace. I pictured a busybody with a clipboard, not a threat. I swapped the mailbox to avoid hassle, thinking it was a one-off. I was wrong. That small surrender was like blood in the water, and Barbara was circling, ready to enforce her rules with a zeal that would soon turn my sanctuary into a battleground. That first HOA violation letter about my mailbox felt like a minor annoyance, a quirky footnote to suburban life. I swapped it out for their approved forest green monstrosity, grumbling under my breath as I installed it, the clunky thing clashing horribly with my home's sleek lines. I figured that was the end of it, a one-time power play from a clipboard-wielding busybody. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized Barbara wasn't just enforcing rules. She was waging a silent war, chipping away at my peace with a relentless barrage of pettiness that made my blood simmer. It started small, almost laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. One morning, I dragged my garbage bins to the curb at dawn per the HOA's rigid schedule. But a client call ran long, and by the time I wheeled them back, 45 minutes past pickup, a fresh notice was already taped to my door. "Visible refuse containers constitute an eyesore," it read in Barbara's prim cursive, complete with a $25 fine and a photo she'd snapped from her Mercedes as she patrolled the street. I stared at the image me bins barely peeking from behind a hedge and felt a flicker of rage. Who had time for this nonsense? I paid the fine online, vowing to set a timer next time, but the helplessness gnawed at me. This was my home, my hard-earned retreat, yet here I was, jumping through hoops like a trained animal. The violations snowballed, each one more absurd than the last, turning my sanctuary into a minefield of paranoia. I planted a delicate Japanese maple in the front yard, its crimson leaves a nod to my frequent trips abroad, a touch of elegance that softened the glass facade. 2 days later, another letter. Unapproved flora violates community botanical guidelines. Apparently, only pre-vetted species were allowed, and my tree wasn't on the list. The fine, $100 plus removal costs. I dug it up myself that weekend, sweat soaking my shirt as Arthur watched from his fence, shaking his head. "She's got a vendetta against anything that stands out," he muttered later over coffee, his voice low like we were plotting a rebellion. He painted a picture of Barbara as the neighborhood's self-crowned dictator, living in a dated ranch house at the subdivision's edge, her jealousy festering toward anyone with a bigger slice of the pie. She'd once fined a family for excessive balloonage at a kid's birthday party, he said, her clipboard a weapon of mass nitpicking. I tried to fight back, attending my first HOA meeting in the community clubhouse, a stuffy room filled with folding chairs and whispered alliances. Barbara presided like a queen on a throne, her unnaturally blonde ponytail pulled tight, her resort wear ensemble screaming forced elegance. I raised my hand politely, explaining the maple's harmless beauty, but she shut me down with a saccharine smile that never touched her eyes. "The rules preserve our aesthetic integrity," she chirped, her voice a grating mix of condescension and finality. The border gaggle of yes-men nodded along, and the motion to waive my fine died unspoken. Walking out, I felt the walls closing in, my independence eroding under this petty tyranny. Was this what homeownership meant? Constant surveillance, endless compliance? The harassment escalated, morphing from fines to outright interference that left me seething with frustration. A package arrived while I was on a short work trip. Nothing extravagant, just tech gadgets for my setup. It sat on the porch for 3 hours before I got home, but that was enough for Barbara. Another notice. Unattended parcels detract from curb appeal, $50 fine. I confronted her that evening, knocking on her door with the letter in hand. She answered with feigned surprise, her polished Mercedes gleaming in the driveway like a trophy. No apologies, just a lecture on community standards. "We're all in this together," she said, but her tone dripped with superiority, as if my modern mansion offended her very existence. I stormed off, determination hardening in my chest. This wasn't just about rules. It was personal, a power trip from a woman who thrived on control. By then, the fines had piled up to nearly $500, each one a paper cut to my pride. I measured my lawn obsessively, ensuring it hit the exact 2-inch height mandated in the bylaws, ruler in hand like some absurd suburban ritual. Arthur caught me at it one afternoon, chuckling despite the sympathy in his eyes. He'd endured her reign for a decade, he confided, watching her transform the HOA into her personal fiefdom. "She's jealous of the new builds like yours," he whispered, glancing toward her house. "Thinks she's entitled to police everyone to feel superior." His stories fueled my growing resolve. I wasn't alone in this nightmare, but that didn't ease the knot of helplessness twisting in my gut. Every notice felt like an invasion, a reminder that my fortress wasn't impenetrable. Then came the turning point, the opportunity that promised escape but unwittingly opened the floodgates to something far worse. A lucrative contract landed in my inbox, a month-long gig in Tokyo securing digital defenses for a multinational corp. It was a career milestone, the kind that could catapult my consultancy to new heights. But the HOA bylaws demanded notification for absences over 2 weeks, a courtesy rule for emergency access. I emailed the board my dates, leaving May 1st back June 1st. Simple, straightforward. I armed my state-of-the-art security system before departing, a labyrinth of sensors, cameras, and smart logs I'd designed myself. Every door, window, and appliance was wired, a digital sentinel watching over my empty home. As my plane lifted off, I felt a rare sense of calm, Tokyo's neon lights awaiting me. Little did I know that email was like handing Barbara the keys to my kingdom. The first week in Tokyo blurred by in a haze of meetings and jet lag, my mind buried in code and client demands. But during a late-night review of my home logs, a habit born from paranoia, I spotted the first anomaly. The master bedroom thermostat had jumped from its energy-saving 65 degrees to a cozy 72, manually adjusted. A glitch, I told myself, dismissing it with a shake of my head. But 2 days later, another alert pinged. The smart fridge registered new items: a gallon of 2% milk, yogurt I never bought, and a bottle of cheap Chardonnay. My pulse quickened. I despised cheap wine. This wasn't random. With dread coiling in my stomach, I accessed my Plex media server. Someone had streamed 3 hours of trashy reality TV the night before, shows about feuding housewives, no less. Heart-hammering, I dove into the camera feeds from my hotel room, thousands of miles away. The footage loaded crystal clear, and there they were. Barbara and her mousy husband, Gary, lounging on my couch like they owned the place. She draped in one of my cashmere throws, sipping from my crystal glass. Him channel surfing on my 85-inch TV, feet propped up. They weren't stealing, they were living there, shoes off, utterly at ease. The audacity hit like a gut punch, rage surging through me as I pieced it together. The emergency key bylaw I'd opposed but lost on, she'd used it to let herself in, fabricating some pretext, then decided my empty mansion was her free upgrade. She knew my return date from the email. She thought she had a month of unchecked luxury. I wanted to explode, to call the police across the ocean and demand they storm the place. But as the initial fury ebbed, the strategist in me emerged, the same cold logic that cracked corporate hacks. A rash call would pit my distant voice against her on-site lies, a leak check or security patrol. No, I needed ironclad proof, something to crush her denials. For the next week, I turned ghost, haunting my own home digitally. I compiled folders of evidence, video of them dining at my table, sleeping in my bed, her rifling through my office. The worst? Footage from the master closet, her trying on my late wife's clothes, twirling in Eleanor's scarf like a vulgar thief desecrating memories. Grief and anger intertwined, fueling a personal vendetta. The smart home logs were a treasure trove. Sonos playlists of cheesy 80s rock, toilet usage timestamps, a ridiculous splurge now paying off, coffee bean depletion tracking their habits. I cross-referenced power spikes proving they'd hosted guests, serving my single malt scotch on my patio while bragging about HOA perks. But intent was key to prove she knew it was wrong. Activating hidden mics, legal in my state. I captured gold, her phone call to a friend, gloating about the empty house and her operational checks, laughing at returning to her shoebox. Then, the damning argument with Gary. He won't be back early, I have his itinerary. Clean up by the 31st and he'll never know. I saved it all, backed up securely, my rage channeling into meticulous planning. This wasn't trespassing. It was a betrayal of trust, an usurpation of my life. But as I leaned back in that Tokyo hotel, evidence mounting, a chilling thought struck. What if she discovered the cameras? What deeper scheme was she hiding? The trap was forming, but the real confrontation loomed, and I had to strike perfectly, or risk her turning the tables. The 12-hour flight from Tokyo felt eternal, every minute a coil of anticipation tightening in my chest. I'd cut my trip short, booking an early return under the radar, my digital arsenal of evidence locked and loaded on encrypted drives. As the plane touched down, I bypassed my usual limo, hailing a cab instead dropping me 2 blocks from Oak Ridge Estates. I wheeled my suitcase down the sun-dappled sidewalk, past manicured lawns and whispering sprinklers, my heart pounding like a war drum. Barbara's modest ranch house loomed at the entrance, her gleaming Mercedes in the drive, empty. A grim smile tugged at my lips. She wasn't home because she was in mine. Rounding the corner, my mansion came into view, glass walls glinting in the afternoon light, a symbol of everything I'd built. And there she was, the architect of my torment, lounging on my porch chaise like a self-anointed empress, draped in my late wife's silk kimono, Eleanor's favorite. A painful relic I'd kept, she sipped from a wine glass, book in lap, utterly oblivious. The sight ignited a firestorm inside me, fury at her entitlement, grief for the desecration, and a cold thrill of impending justice. I gripped my phone, discreetly recording as my lawyer David had instructed, and strode up the driveway with deliberate calm. This was it, the culmination of her arrogance, my patience forged into a blade. She glanced up, confusion flickering across her Botox-smooth face. Then recognition hit, her eyes widening in shock, color draining like water from a punctured balloon. The wine glass wobbled. For a split second, raw terror flashed, caught red-handed. But Barbara's fatal flaw surged forward, that unyielding arrogance, twisting fear into aggression. She bolted upright, kimono slipping, voice sharpening to a blade. "Who are you?" "This is private property," she demanded as if I were the intruder. Neighbors' curtains twitched. Arthur emerged on his lawn, arms crossed, watching. I set my suitcase down at the porch steps, voice steady despite the rage boiling beneath. "Hello, Barbara. I live here." Her face flushed crimson, blotchy with denial. "Impossible! The owner's not back for 2 weeks." The slip was golden, an unwitting confession of her timeline tracking scheme. Before I could respond, she snatched her phone, fingers flying. "You're trespassing! I'm calling the police!" Her shriek echoed across the subdivision, drawing more eyes. I stood impassive, letting her unravel, David's words echoing, "Let her make the first move. Her outrage will bury her." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing to a roar as two cruisers screeched into my driveway, lights strobing red and blue across the facade. My pulse thundered, a mix of vindication and nerves. This was the gamble, the moment where evidence met reality. Officers emerged. Young, eager Reed, hand on his holster, and seasoned Sergeant Miller, calm eyes assessing the chaos. Barbara pointed wildly, voice pitching into hysterics. "Arrest him! He's breaking in, threatening me." She painted herself the victim, a lone woman defending her home, her performance Oscar-worthy if not for the desperation cracking through. Reed stepped toward me, tense. "Hands where I can see them, sir." I raised them slowly, phone still recording, contrasting her frenzy with my composure. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding. This is my house." Barbara snorted derisively. "He's lying." "I'm the HOA president, responsible for this property while the owner's away." "He's a danger!" She wielded her title like a shield, that petty authority she'd abused for years, believing it invincible. It was exactly what we'd anticipated her overplaying her hand, entrenching herself in the lie. Miller held up a hand, silencing her mid-rant, his gaze shifting from her theatrics to my calm. "ID, sir?" I nodded, slowly retrieving my wallet, handing over my driver's license. He scanned it, eyes flicking to the address, 1120 Cypress Lane, a subtle doubt creasing his brow as he turned to Barbara. "Ma'am, this matches the property," she sputtered, cornered. So what? He could have stolen it, forged it. "As HOA president, I'm telling you, he's not the owner." Her voice cracked, desperation peaking, staking everything on her flimsy power. Frustration surged in my years of her fines, her invasions, culminating here, but I held back, letting facts fight. "Officers," I said evenly, "I can prove ownership in seconds. May I approach the door?" Miller nodded warily. I stepped past Barbara, her venomous glare burning holes, and placed my thumb on the biometric lock. A soft chime, the deadbolt clicked open, the door swinging ajar. Silence crashed down, irrefutable. "You can't fake a fingerprint." Barbara froze, mouth agape, the queen dethroned in an instant. Triumph swelled in my chest, hot and fierce, but I pressed on. "And I have evidence of her illegally occupying my home for 17 days, consuming my goods, using my belongings." As if scripted, David's black sedan pulled up curbside. He strode over, briefcase in hand, sharp suit exuding authority. "Sergeant Miller," he greeted, shaking hands. "I'm Frank's counsel. We believe Mrs. Clean has been squatting here unlawfully." Barbara's eyes darted, panic rising. "Lies! I was inspecting plumbing issues!" Her excuse crumbled as David opened his briefcase. "Inspections involving sleeping in his bed, wearing his late wife's clothes, hosting parties with his scotch?" He pulled a tablet, tapping play. Her voice boomed from the speakers, clear, damning. "He won't be back early. Clean up by the 31st and he'll never know." The officers' faces hardened, neutrality shattering into resolve. Barbara's bluster evaporated, leaving a sallow shell, terror etching lines on her face. Vindication hit me like a wave anger for Eleanor's violated memories, frustration from endless fines, all channeling into this sweet, sharp justice. But the bombshell wasn't done. The front door creaked wider. Gary peeked out, pale and sweating. Seeing the cops, he crumbled. "I'm sorry, I told her it was wrong. She forced me." His betrayal sealed it, her last ally turning state's evidence on the spot. Miller stepped forward, voice official. "Barbara Clean, you're under arrest for criminal trespass and burglary." Handcuffs clicked shut, the metallic ratchet echoing like thunder. She whimpered, defeated, as Reed led her to the cruiser, public humiliation unfolding before the neighborhood she'd terrorized. Arthur nodded approvingly from afar. Whispers rippled through watching neighbors. Triumph coursed through me, raw and electric, but as the car doors slammed, a deeper satisfaction bloomed. The tyrant fallen, her empire cracking. Yet the real reckoning, the fallout that would reshape everything, was just beginning. As the patrol car's taillights faded down Cypress Lane, a profound silence blanketed the neighborhood. broken only by the distant hum of sprinklers and the faint rustle of leaves in the late afternoon breeze. Barbara's arrest wasn't just the end of a confrontation. It was the shattering of an illusion, the moment her carefully constructed facade of authority crumbled under the weight of her own hubris. I stood on my porch, the biometric door still ajar behind me, watching as curious neighbors emerged from their homes, whispering in clusters. Arthur crossed the lawn, his face etched with a mix of relief and quiet triumph, clapping me on the shoulder without a word. The air felt lighter, as if the subdivision itself had exhaled a long-held breath. But this was far from over the real work of justice. The untangling of her web was just beginning. In the immediate aftermath, the scene transformed from chaos to methodical resolution. Gary, her hapless husband, slunk out of my house like a shadow, mumbling apologies to the officers before scurrying back to their ranch home. He wasn't charged. David and I agreed he was more pawn than perpetrator, his public betrayal and the inevitable marital fallout punishment enough. As for my mansion, I finally crossed the threshold, the familiar scent of home now tainted by their intrusion. Drawers rifled, linens rumpled, empty wine bottles in the recycling. It was a violation that ran deeper than property, stirring echoes of loss from Eleanor's passing. But with David by my side, we documented everything anew, ensuring no detail escaped the legal net. The criminal case against Barbara unfolded with the precision of a well-oiled machine, her arrogance no match for the digital fortress I'd built. Faced with the avalanche of evidence hours of high-definition video capturing her lounging in my living room, audio of her gloating confessions, logs tracking every flush and fridge open, her defense attorney advised a guilty plea to reduce charges of criminal trespass and theft. In court, she appeared diminished, her severe ponytail limp, her resort wear replaced by a ill-fitting suit that screamed defeat. The judge, reviewing the footage of her parading in Eleanor's clothes, didn't hide his disdain. Probation for 3 years, community service, mandatory counseling for entitlement issues, and a hefty fine that bit into her savings. But the restitution order was the crowning blow. She had to repay every cent of what she'd consumed or damaged, down to the last drop of single malt scotch and the dry cleaning bill for that kimono. I calculated it meticulously, turning her indulgence into an itemized ledger of humiliation. The premium coffee beans depleted by her morning rituals, 45. The Chardonnay she'd guzzled, $12 per bottle, times 3. The electricity spike from her endless reality TV binges, $87. Even the water usage from her luxurious soaks in my jetted tub added up. David presented the bill in mediation, her face paling as the total climbed past $2,500. She paid it all, the check arriving weeks later like a grudging admission of guilt. In a twist of poetic justice, I endorsed it straight to a local shelter for the homeless, turning her abuse of shelter into aid for those truly in need. It felt like closing a painful chapter, transforming violation into something redemptive. The ripples extended far beyond her personal downfall, dismantling the toxic empire she'd ruled for a decade. Word of the arrest spread like wildfire through Oak Ridge Estates, fueled by neighborhood chats and Arthur's discreet retellings. The HOA board, a cabal of enablers who'd rubber-stamped her every whim, plunged into disarray. An emergency meeting was called in the clubhouse, the room packed with homeowners who'd long suffered in silence fined for flower choices, harassed over holiday lights. David and I attended, not as conquerors, but as catalysts for change. He laid out the facts clinically, how the emergency key bylaw had enabled her crime, how the board's negligence exposed everyone to risk. Murmurs turned to outrage as I projected key evidence, a still of her hosting that patio party, a transcript of her smug phone call bragging about her free vacation. The board members squirmed, their complicity laid bare. One by one, they resigned amid boos and demands for accountability, their spineless tenure exposed as the foundation of Barbara's reign. A motion from the floor seconded by a dozen voices called for the permanent repeal of the key access rule. Labeling it a security nightmare, it passed unanimously. The vote, a cathartic release for a community weary of surveillance. In the vacuum, nominations flew for a new board. Several pushed my name forward, but I declined. My battles were fought in code and courts, not meetings. Instead, I nominated Arthur, the wise professor who'd been my early ally. He hesitated, but the standing ovation coaxed him in. Under his leadership, the HOA transformed. Transparent budgets, reasonable guidelines focused on maintenance over micromanagement, even community events that fostered unity rather than division. For Barbara and Gary, the consequences were life-altering, a stark lesson in the perils of unchecked envy. Arthur kept me updated through casual fence chats. They sold their ranch house within months, the proceeds swallowed by legal fees, fines, and restitution. The U-Haul truck idling in their driveway became neighborhood lore, their grim faces a symbol of downfall. Last I heard, they'd relocated to a cramped condo in a less affluent town, her Mercedes traded for a sensible sedan, her HOA dreams reduced to bitter memories. Gary filed for divorce not long after, citing the strain of her schemes. She faded into obscurity, her name a cautionary tale whispered at block parties. My own life reclaimed its rhythm, the mansion once again a true sanctuary. I reinstated my sleek black mailbox, its return a small but symbolic victory over conformity. Evenings on the patio, scotch in hand, the same bottle she'd pilfered from, brought a sense of reclaimed peace, the sunset painting the glass walls in golden hues. The ordeal sharpened my professional edge. Clients marveled at the Tokyo Trap story I shared in anonymized case studies, turning personal adversity into a testament to data's power. Emotionally, it forced me to confront lingering grief over Eleanor, prompting me to donate her wardrobe to charity, finding closure in generosity. Yet the true impact lingered in the community's quiet evolution. Neighbors who'd once averted eyes now waved warmly, bonds forged in shared relief. Petty disputes dwindled. Arthur's board emphasized dialogue over diktats, proving that one person's stand could recalibrate an entire system. The absurdity of it all, a woman's jealousy spiraling into felony over a perceived upgrade, highlighted the fragility of suburban facades, how entitlement could erode the very foundations of home. In the end, this wild saga reinforced a timeless truth. Bullies like Barbara thrive in the shadows of apathy, wielding petty power as a shield for deeper insecurities. But arm yourself with patience, evidence, and unyielding resolve, and their empires dissolve like mist in the morning sun. They underestimate the quiet ones, the data-driven dreamers who see patterns where others see peace. So if you've ever felt trapped by a neighborhood tyrant, remember, the best revenge isn't loud vengeance. It's the calm click of justice locking into place. What would you do if your home became someone else's playground? Drop your thoughts below. This story's proof that standing firm can change everything.